Video seems, oh, there we go. My video is moving now. Hi, everybody. Steve Sandy, and we're back for day 2 of AWT Live. We actually started the show yesterday, and as luck would have it, everything happened at the same time. Everybody wanted to be on right towards the beginning here, so this is great to see. What we're going to be doing in this show is really talking about talking to, I should say, some of the people who really make the world of Apple revolve. And one of those people is somebody I thought about almost immediately when I started thinking about doing the show. We met at several of the Macworld iWorld conferences. He's been developing for the Mac probably longer than anybody else in the business. And that person is Jim Rea. His company is ProVUE Development. The product is Panorama 10, an incredibly powerful database program for Mac. And Jim, if you could give our audience some background about yourself, your company, and Panorama, that would be absolutely awesome. So go for it, Jim. And everything seems to have locked up on my end here. Jim, can you hear me? See, this is the fun of live video, is that we never know when things are going to go to heck here. So yeah, I think he's dropped off. So hopefully he'll be back in a moment. There he is. He's back.
That was a new one.
Hey,
I don't know if that was my end or your end.
I would hope it was your end, but it was funny. Yesterday, somebody we both know was on the show, and that was Mr. Chuck Joyner. And I had to tell Chuck that whenever he and I get together, things can be working perfectly with my live streams, with everything else. And you know what happens? He and I get together, and things go to heck. And sure enough, yesterday, I had been doing some tests with my Ethernet connection in my basement here, and the Ethernet connection just totally went away. So I'm not sure what happened, but it looks like it's working now. So I think we're good.
Good.
Eh,
I upgraded my ISP about 2 months ago. The old one went out during the pandemic. Not a good time.
No, really bad.
But the cable now has been rock solid, and very fast. So that's good.
Awesome. So before the internet decided to disjoin us there, basically, I think what way we'll kind of start is to have you introduce yourself, your company, and talk about Panorama.
Okay. So yeah, I've actually been developing for the Mac since 1984. I had been. I had a company that wrote software for a mini computer called an Alpha Micro, which at that time was using a 68,000 computer. So the Mac came out, and I was like, wait, I know how to program for that processor. And I had a RAM-based database that I was selling for that computer, for the Alpha Micro computer. And I was like, I'm going to make that come out for the Macintosh. And I actually got a Macintosh in February of 1984.
Wow.
I think like 4 or 5 weeks after the Mac was announced. Well, it was January 20th was the announcement.
Yeah.
And by the end of February, I had one. Actually, I got it. I live in California, still do. And a friend of mine in Connecticut called me and said, there's a dealer here, and they have an extra Mac. But they were hard to get. You want it? Somehow Apple had sent them an extra one, more than they ordered. So it wasn't spoken for, because all the others had been pre-ordered. And he was like, I'll bet Jim wanted what do we want? Yes, yes, yes. So they sent it to me from Connecticut, and then the problem was that there was no development software that ran on a Mac at that time. So in order to write programs for the Mac, you had to have a Lisa computer.
Oh man.
Exactly. So it's kind of like the way you do an iPhone and iPad now, where you use a Mac and you tether it. It's basically the same thing. You had to use a Lisa and you tethered it. And not only that, but it wasn't, it was special developer software. It wasn't the regular Lisa software. So I found a dealer here in California that would sell me a Lisa at a good price. And then I don't remember how I got the developer software, because you couldn't buy it. The only way you were supposed to get it was to join the Apple developer program, which I immediately applied for. But remember, this is not like go on and fill out an online form.
Yeah.
There was no internet or anything, so you had to fill out a paper form and mail it off. And I think ultimately it took like 3 months to get approved to be a developer. And I was like, I don't know how long this is going to take. I'm not waiting. First movers are going to, I mean, I was a young kid then, but I knew that, this was my chance to sneak in ahead of, some big companies, hopefully. So somehow I found a bootleg copy of the
Wow.
of the Lisa software, and I got to work. And I started porting over my database from this other 68K computer, and by around May, I had, sort of like, it wasn't something you could use, but I had a database that was built into it that you could open, and you could, I could show people, like, look, here I can do a sort, here I can, search for some data. But nobody had seen it. Apple didn't know about it. I think around this point they did approve us for, the developer program, but
A little late, but it worked.
I had what I needed, so I kind of like, you're not going to stop me. And I had a friend who was also an Alpha Micro developer, and he had licensed, he was in Chicago, and he had licensed a C compiler called SoftWorks C, and he had ported that to the Alpha Micro. So this was still pretty early days of C. And so he decided to port that to the Macintosh. And he did that pretty quickly because it was designed to be portable. And he had that working by about this time, April or May. And somehow he got in touch with they had an evangelist team at Apple, which Guy Kawasaki was in charge of it.
Yeah.
And so he flew out there, and I had never heard of him. It wasn't publicized at that point. So Bob flew out there, and he met with them, and he was like, he called me on the phone. He's like, Jim, you got to meet these people. And I think he put one of them on the phone. And they were like, okay, well, send us your program, and we'll look at it and see what we think. And I'm like, no way am I sending you my program. That's not happening. But I will get on a plane. If you'll let me in the building, I will fly up there. I will show you my program. And they're like, okay.
So that's
So it was like, I think it was late April probably of 1984. It might have been early May. I got on a plane. I flew up there. First person I met with was a guy named Alan Rossman. You may have heard of him. He went on to, be not as well known as Guy, but I think he did some venture capitalism and stuff like that. And I stuck my disk in and fired it up and showed my one database. I mean, you couldn't even open, it didn't have an open file dialog. It just had the one database that was actually built into the code.
oh cool. So
And so I started to show it to him, and he got as excited as anybody I've ever seen in my life. He started jumping up and down, and he was like, "Oh come from? How come we've never heard of you? You have a program, and he thought it looked just like AppleWorks. I didn't know anything about AppleWorks. I'd never used an Apple II.
Oh,
My
wow.
background was CPM, if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah.
I had a commercial program for CPM actually, starting in the 1970s. So that's actually, we could go back and I've got some stories from that too. But so I completely skipped Apple II. I don't think I've ever even touched an Apple II. But apparently that first program, which was called Overview at that time, not Panorama, but basically the same program. And apparently it looked kind of similar to the spreadsheet in AppleWorks.
I'll be damned. So,
And,
so
and he started running up and down and grabbing people like, you got to look at this.
yeah, you got to take a look at this
I
thing.
guess Guy was his boss, so he grabbed Guy, and then Guy wound up taking over. And I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks later, I was showing the program in the Apple booth at Las Vegas for the National Computer Conference in 1984.
Oh, wow.
And a couple, like in August, I went to Apple had, in those days Apple had a sales conference. They had sales representatives all over the world that called on customers. That's how they did the thing then. I don't think they were actually Apple employees. I think they were agencies or something. But every year they had a conference, so they had this conference in Honolulu. And I was told it really didn't matter where it wasn't more expensive to do it in Honolulu than to anywhere else. So, but anyway, they brought myself and about 5 other software people out to Honolulu, and I think we were all the people that had shipped software for the Mac. By August, I'd shipped it. And Apple, one thing they did that was really cool was they bought 300 copies at full price, and they gave it out to I think it was to these salespeople. So, that was pretty exciting. These people knew who I was, and they were all excited that, oh my gosh, there's 6 programs for the Macintosh.
And you're one of them.
You're one of them. They had it was a week-long thing. My thing was only like 4 hours. They had set up a booth, and they're like, you don't need to bring anything except a disk. And you stand there for 4 hours. And I brought home, they made signs and stuff. I still have the sign that it was like basically my first trade show sign, which Apple made.
Oh, wow.
So I've got it. I think it's in my storage unit.
Well, that needs to go to like the computer museum one of these days.
If they're interested.
You never know. Yeah.
You never know. So, and I did meet I met both Steves at that thing. And Steve Wozniak, which is the nicest guy, he was clearly very, very nervous because he was about to speak to this large group of about 3,000 people because they had an Apple II Forever Day. That was like day 3 of the thing. And Apple II was still paying all the bills.
Oh, yeah.
And Macintosh was just this little thing, and Apple II was really where the money was. And so Steve was about to give a rah-rah speech, and I saw him standing over the side, and I went and introduced myself. And he was clearly nervous, but also very very nice and very gracious. The other Steve, not so much.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people have said that. Folks who have met him, yeah. He definitely made a difference in the world, but
He did, yeah. And you gotta take your hat off, especially round 2.
yeah.
And you gotta think nobody else could have done that. I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, and you take a look at every day. When I pull up my iPad screen, over on the Today view over there, one of the things I have is stock market, see how it's doing, and to see a company that was just on the brink of just disappearing altogether, and with a market valuation right now of like close to, I think it was 1.65 trillion today. It's just phenomenal when you see how much that company has changed.
And I've known a couple people that were high enough at Apple that worked with him a fair amount, and they didn't really have bad things to say about it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably if you were one of those people who he completely trusted and had, he respected you. You were one of the people.
Well, I know one person, who said if you knew what you were talking about and stood up to him, then you're okay. And he might, whatever, yell at you or whatever, but then I guess a typical thing would be the next day he would come back and present your idea, and as if, like he had thought of, hey, I thought of this great thing last night.
Yeah, you just have to sit there and go, oh, man. Well, so you've gone through, I take it that Panorama 10 was definitely your 10th iteration of the application?
No.
Or did you jump?
Yeah. Well, we had Overview 1, and then I think 1.1 and 1.5 and 2 and 2.1, and then it jumped to Panorama, and I think that was 1.0 and 1.1 and 1.5 and 2.0, 2.1, 3, 3.1, 4, 5, 5.5, and 6. So I don't know how many that is. And then when I jumped from 6 to 10, I basically, it's a new program. So Panorama 6 started, in 1985, and there's still 1985 code in Panorama 6.
Wow.
Just kept adding and adding, but it was built on those APIs from the original days, and eventually that got turned to Carbon, but still the same code. And then it became clear that really had no future. It was a 32-bit code base. It wasn't going to be, and it was all based on the Carbon APIs, not on the Coco or AppKit APIs. And so it was like, it took longer than I thought. I mean, it wasn't until Catalina that they completely dropped those APIs. I thought that would happen earlier. In fact, I kind of felt like I was in a race the whole time before Apple, throws these out. And fortunately I did, but largely because it took Apple longer than I thought it would. I thought that might have happened a few years earlier.
Well, and of course we.
So at that time, since I was rewriting the whole thing as a AppKit, Coco Objective C app, it was like, well, it deserves a jump, and it was OS 10, and it was like Final Cut 10. It was very similar to the transition from Final Cut 7 to 10. You remember that?
I sure do.
They completely rewrote that, and it was basically technologically the same transition. And we've had some of the same issues, which I knew we would, with customers of, that weren't happy because it's so different. But you pretty much have to go through that transition. And I'm like, we're just going to have to do that, bite the bullet. And it was obviously the right thing to do. And it's kind of, the product had kind of stalled, and now it's taken off and moving forward again. So.
Well, that's one of the big questions I was going to ask you, because knowing that you've had, this years and years and years of experience developing for the Mac, and, all of a sudden we've got this new plan, Apple's Silicon, coming up, and we hear about Rosetta 2, of course. It'll take some of the legacy, quote-unquote legacy apps, but do you see yourself going in and doing another kind of rebuild, rewrite of the app?
I don't think that's going to be necessary.
Oh, cool.
So I've been through, first it went from 68K to PowerPC, which was a fair amount of work. and then PowerPC to Intel. And then in between that was switching from classic, Mac OS APIs to Carbon.
Yeah.
Because although Carbon's like a compatibility layer, it was still a multi-year project to make a Carbon app. That wasn't just, snap your fingers. It wasn't near as big as transitioning to Cocoa was. That was a complete rewrite. It wasn't able to keep any of it. But so in going to Carbon, I still kept most of the code, but kind of had to work at the underpinnings to adjust it. So kind of like moving onto a new foundation, and then moving to Cocoa was just like I hardly even looked at the old source code.
Cool.
It was really sort of almost a clean room kind of a thing. But I don't think this ARM transition is going to be a big deal. I'm a little bit behind right now on not running the latest version of Xcode. So I think that might be, a little bit of, like maybe it'll take a week to, it's been on my list anyway. I've got to do that. And I suspect that once that's done, it's not going to take very long. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if it took less than a day.
Wow.
I wouldn't be shocked if it took more than a day, but I would be quite surprised if it took more than 2 weeks. It's not like there's a, because, high-level software now, it's not written on machine code anymore.
Yeah.
The original version of ProVUE was written in assembler language, but now it's written, way above the metal. So
Yeah.
you're relying on the compiler to do that, and Apple's got a new compiler. You just tell it, yeah, make code for that. When they switched from PowerPC to Intel, the biggest issue for me was, and some other programs, was a thing called Indian, and that's got to do with a computer processor can be either little endian or big endian.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Have you heard of that? So
Yes, I have.
For those people who haven't, it's basically got to do with if you have, say, a 32-bit number, the question is, the data in the memory is actually bytes, 8 bytes. So how do you store the 32-bit number in bytes? And do you put the lower part of the number in the low bytes, or you can store them in the high bytes? And somehow that got little endian and big endian. I think it's an Indian or something. And anyway, PowerPC is big endian. So is 68K. Intel is little endian. And again, it still doesn't really matter, but in those days, sometimes you'd have software that would access the same value, sometimes as a byte, and sometimes, sometimes you'd just be like, oh, I only care about this, the low end part of it. And then sometimes, or there would also be places where you would access it as bytes. It's kind of technical, and it's the kind of thing you never do anymore. But so that was different on those two processors. So you had to find every single place in your code where you were doing that, and make allowances. So if you're writing new code, you would plan that. Although you actually wouldn't now because nobody does that kind of thing. And the other, so I don't think the current Panorama 10, I don't think it has any endian dependencies. And then the other thing is that the ARM chip actually can work in either little endian or big endian. Apparently, you can flip a switch and the chip doesn't really care. So Apple's going to flip it to make it work the same way as Intel. So that was one of the biggest issues in that transition. Not going to be an issue. But sort of a long story short.
Wow, that's going to be, it's. I'm finding the entire move to be, kind of like, gee, we've seen this before, because you talk about getting your first Mac. I got my first Mac December of 1984. I waited for the 512, and that was my first Mac. And everybody I knew thought I was insane getting this thing. Oh, it's so overpriced, and it's like, Yeah, well,
I've got a good story actually about the 512 Mac that goes back to that meeting in Honolulu.
yeah.
You remember that they told me don't bring anything except a diskette. Don't bring a computer.
Yeah.
We'll have the computers. We're all good. Okay. So, and of course they weren't laptops then, although those computers weren't too hard to carry. But so I left the
Yeah.
computer at home. So it turned out that um, we had a 128K computer back at home, and it was all developed on a 128K computer. And we got there, and they were announcing the 512. It wasn't out yet,
Whoa.
but they were announcing it, and all the computers they brought were 512s. Every single one. They did not bring a single 128. And it turned out there was a bug in my program, and it didn't work on a 512. Of course, I'd never seen a 512.
Yeah. Nobody had, except
Nobody
some
had.
Apple employees.
And I stick the disk in, and it crashes. And I was like, I came all this way, and I was so, they're like, it's all right. And I'm like, no, it's not. And all the development stuff, and actually, I wound up. What I wound up doing with the Lisa was I wrote a way to transfer software from my Alpha Micro mini computer. And so for the first, I actually only used the Lisa for a few weeks. And then I used the Alpha Micro as the machine that was the development machine, and it was tethered to the Mac. And I did that for several years because the Alpha Micro was a much more powerful, um, you know, so that, but that was a big, mini computer that, you definitely weren't carrying. So I
Yeah.
did none of that. But fortunately, I stayed up until like 3 in the morning, and I had an idea of what it could be. And there was a hex editor dump program, which is kind of amazing at that early days. I don't know but so I went and I looked in. I'm like, maybe I can see in the machine code. I think I know what I'm looking for. And it took like 6 hours, and I found it.
Oh, wow.
Because the problem was, I think I was requesting too much memory the way I was doing it. And I was like, Dad, if I can edit that number, I'll fix it. And I did.
Oh,
So I was able to show the software.
and you were probably really sleepy the next day, but, lots of Kona coffee.
I don't remember. They really knew how to throw a party these days. All the breaks, they had caviar and
Wow.
on Thursday, I think it was Thursday. I think it was Monday through Friday. And on Thursday night, they bussed everybody. It was like 40 buses to the other side of the island, and there was some ranch out there where they filmed movies, and Apple rented the whole thing, and they had their party.
Wow.
And then there was some band playing, and I assumed it was a cover band, and it was like whatever, but then I happened to like be listening to the patter they were in between some songs, and I realized, no, this is not a cover band. This is a band that it was at the time, and I don't remember their name, but they were a top 40, they
Whoa.
were on the charts right at that minute, and apparently had flown in from a show, in New York or something, to do this Apple thing.
And what's crazy, it's so cool to see that the company still does that. Every once in a while you'll see something where, oh, today at Apple Park we had so-and-so come in and give a, impromptu concert, and we had barbecue. And it's just,
I think now, they're worth 1.4, 1.5 trillion. Everybody's got their devices in their pockets. Bands are probably falling all over themselves for the privilege.
yeah.
I'm sure they're paid, but in 1984, it wasn't. My mom didn't know who Apple was.
Yeah, I can remember my dad, when I don't know if you remember, but towards the end of 1984, there was this program, Test Drive a Mac. And Yeah, you'd go to the store, you'd basically fill out a credit application for the original Apple credit card, with the
Right.
rainbow Apple on it. And then you could have the device for, I think, 14 days. And
Right.
if you returned it, they didn't do anything. I don't even think they cut up your card, hoping that you would eventually buy some Apple product. But if you did, then you started making the payments. And so I did this test drive an Apple thing, and I had an aunt who came in from out of town. She's, long since passed away, but brought this thing over to my parents' house, set it up, plugged it in. Isn't this cool? My dad was looking at it, it's like, wow, that thing is weird looking. He's used to seeing like an IBM PC or an Apple II, the monitor on top of this box. And the funny thing was, this aunt of mine, she's like, I'd never be able to use this thing. So I sat her down, and they had that, learn to run the Macintosh little program where you'd go in and, learn how to click, click on the birds and they would fly away, do all that. And she did that, and she was so proud of herself. It's like, I can use a computer. And that's when I realized that, because I was still kind of wishy-washy. Do I really want to keep this thing? Do I want to bring it back? And seeing her reaction actually made a huge difference to me. It was like, this is, a lady who's fairly uneducated. She sat down and she could do stuff with this computer in no time at all. And that's when it really, really clicked home with me. And after that, it was mine. Haven't looked back. Even, I brought up to Chuck Joyner yesterday. There was about a 9-year period of my life where I worked for IBM. And that was when you didn't bring up the word Apple. If you did, people laughed at you. It was just like, ha ha ha, that company. 1995 to 2004. And, it's funny because,
Windows.
what's that? Yeah, peak Windows. Yeah, and fortunately, I managed to skip the OS2 days, which was,
Right.
a real good thing, thank God. But it was just absolutely, one of those.
Everyone skipped the OS2 days?
I think even, it was so funny because we had OS2 running on a couple of machines in a server room because I think some person really just couldn't get away from it, and they had this one particular application that was running on it. But oh my God, ugh, awful, awful, awful. And I won't talk about token ring networking. That was another thing they were pushing, but even they were out of that by the time I started working for the company. But a little aside, since we're both old guys talking about fun things. Well, you're not old, I am, but yeah, we. You may be, but you look good. Come on, man, you look great.
You look good too.
Well, I don't think I definitely have less hair than the last time we met. I think I.
Well, you always had the hat on, so.
Good point. I should wear one now because I think I'm blinding people.
Do you have hair under there? But that's why I'm wearing the hat. There's too much of it right now.
Ah. Well, I just got a haircut yesterday, so it got trimmed down.
They're closed again here.
Ah, that's sad. Yeah, ours you have to go in and you get you have to make an appointment. You get your temperature taken before you go in. They make you fill out a medical questionnaire, and then you go in. And I had to laugh because the woman's she said, "Do you want your sideburns trimmed?" And I said, "Sure." And I'm thinking, I bet you anything she's going to cut the strap to my face mask. Yep. So she had to run and grab another one there, but interesting times we live in.
Interesting time.
Oh man, I was just curious. It seems like there's a lot of not commonality, but almost a convergence of what we're seeing with iOS and iPadOS, of course, and Mac OS. And in fact, on the Apple Silicon machines, allegedly we'll be able to run iOS apps on those devices. Do you think that eventually there is going to be kind of a convergence into one operating system, or do you think they'll keep the little environments?
I I think they're already there. Well, maybe not
Interesting.
quite there, but and it was interesting. Was it last year or I think it was last year they had the big no
Yeah.
about merging
Yeah.
the two of them, and clearly that's not the plan, and but there hasn't been much fuss about it, and I think it's because of the way they're doing it that is not the way that people expected. Um, I think people basically expected them to turn Mac OS into iOS and sort of get rid of Mac OS, and it doesn't look like that's what they're doing. But I think it's exciting. I think it's really exciting.
Yeah.
And if you look at, I've so far managed to watch about 20 of the talks, um, and I watched a bunch of the talks about using trackpads and mice on iPad, and how that works. And interestingly, that actually came out a couple months before WWDC,
Yeah.
and I think people have like already forgotten it. Like I was listening to some podcast, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, Apple didn't do much for the iPad at this year's WWDC," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's because they revolutionized it 2 months earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. How much more can you
How much
do?
more do you want?" Um,
In fact, I thought it was interesting. I see where who was it? Logitech came out with a keyboard with a trackpad for the small, the 10 point whatever it is inch iPad Pro. I would love to see that for the 12.9, but maybe someday.
is this something that came out with today?
Yeah, just today.
I think I saw the headline for that, but I didn't have time because I had to get ready for this interview that I was late for.
Well, like I said, don't worry about it because we didn't announce it to anybody. It's like if somebody happens to see the stream and gets on there, that's good. But for the most part, we're just gonna, people are gonna watch the rerun. Yeah.
I didn't even but I want to respect your time. I wasn't that late.
No, you weren't. In fact, I didn't even notice, and then all of a sudden you were there, and I went, "Oh, we are a few minutes."
I think it must have been automated. There was an email that came. You have an automated email that came? I think about 10 minutes to 12.
Oh,
10 minutes to 1. It was like, don't forget.
I don't think I
Must have been automated.
must have been automated. Weird.
I haven't forgotten. I think I replied to it even. Maybe that was probably futile.
Well, I tell you, I've been actually pretty impressed with. I've been playing with Restream, and let's see, 3 different applications. Restream, that's what allows us to stream this to 3 different spots at once. Calendly, which I've been using that's what you use to set up the time. And that actually integrates with Zoom, so it set up the Zoom meetings and everything, and it may have sent out the email for all I know. So
Yeah.
these things are doing things we don't even know about anymore. I love it.
It is cool. Yeah, we're all stuck at home and can't get out, which sucks. But I've done quite a few Zoom things during the week of WWDC. I think I was on Zoom for 7 hours or 9 hours or something like that.
Wow.
Um, and it was great. Yeah, I did a thing with Chuck, and then it was Release Notes had a thing that was they had a sort of a mixer thing, and there was a 2-hour thing. I thought you would be there. Did you even know about it?
Oh, I heard about that, and we were actually doing something else that night, and ended up missing it. But yeah, the 2-hour reunion.
I think that was actually my fault.
Oh no. Well, if they have another one, I'll have to show up.
Because I follow several of them, converse with several of them on Twitter, and I think Mike put out something that was an anniversary of some sort, and I'm like, well, are you going to have a WWDC party? You guys always had great parties.
Yeah.
And a bunch of them jumped on and were like, yeah, we should do that.
Yeah. Well, seriously, I hope they do it again because, it was like I heard about it, looked at the calendar, and went,
Yeah.
bashing my head up against the wall. But, that was a fun organization. We, especially when we all used to get together at Macworld Expo.
Yeah.
It was just tons of fun. And the one thing I remember is when we had our booth at the expo, and people would come up and they'd go, "What do you sell?
Right.
What's this TUA? Is it a software program?" It was hysterical, and we'd have to explain. It just got to the point. I think it might have been Victor Agreda who went ahead and he made a sign, or had it made, put it up there. TUA is the unofficial Apple weblog. We are a website, and put it on our sign so that, we didn't have to keep explaining it time after time after time.
We still had to point because people don't read.
Yeah, good point. It was hysterical. You talked about your first Mac being the 128, and of course the Alpha Micro machine. Do you still have any of those machines?
I pretty much have all of them.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
most of them. And yeah, I still got the 128. I've still got the Lisa. I don't have my big Alpha Micro. I gave it to somebody. But I do have a couple of the smaller Alpha Micros.
Wow.
And I still have the machine I started on was a machine I built from scratch with an 8080 starting around 1975.
Wasn't a MITS Altair, was it?
No. I built it from scratch.
You built it from scratch? You designed and built it from scratch?
Yeah, and
Wow.
actually, when the Altair came out in January of 1975, and there was a big article in Popular Electronics,
Yeah.
I should have that magazine, but I cannot find it. Kind of disappointing. But I know I had it at one point, and maybe I still have it somewhere, but I have searched for it and not found it. I do have like the original Byte magazine and stuff like that. But anyway, they had a two-part article about the Altair, and I had wanted a computer from a very young age, and unlike
Me too.
people now, there were no computers.
Yeah.
So just to establish, I was born in '57.
Me too. So we are the same age.
Oh, we're the same age. Okay.
What day? We got to find out here.
August 8th.
Okay, September 11th. So
Pretty close.
a month apart. This is scary.
Wow.
Great minds think alike here.
Yeah.
Except you were smarter than I. Yeah, you too. Well,
Yeah, my mom claims she took me out to see it. Like there, that's your future.
my first satellite I remember remember the Echo. It was
I know what it is. I don't know that if I remember it from contemporaneous.
it was a big inflatable silver
I
mylar.
know
Yeah,
about it, but whether I remember it from
looking at it.
later or at the time, I might have. I guess I'm not sure what year it was. I
Yeah.
definitely, I think my contemporaneous memory is definitely Gemini. I remember the Gemini
Yeah.
very, very well. I don't think I remember Mercury, from being conscious of it when I was, 4. But by the time Gemini came around,
Yeah.
I was totally into it, and we used to knock the chairs over backwards and have simulated countdowns. And
So crazy. Yeah, my sister and I had matching, well, except they were different colors, but they were the same kind of chair. And she and I used to do Gemini missions all the time when we were kids. That's crazy. So at least we weren't the only people doing that. And then, the good thing about it was we really got, we were at that very impressionable age when Apollo.
right.
Yeah, that's why my wife went into the space business and retired after 36 years in the space biz was Apollo.
Yeah, and obviously I followed that very closely.
Yeah.
Also, and everybody was like, "Oh, Jim wants to be an astronaut when he grows up." then I kind of like even I did it at, like when I was like 10, but I think by the time I was 13 or 14, I was like, I wanted to do computers, but there was no computer.
Yeah.
My dad did that, but it was mainframes, and he'd bring home punch cards. Um, and he never really encouraged me very much. And then when I got into computers, he was sort of like, "That's not a computer," kind of like that. Who was that Aussie guy with the knife? That's not a
Yeah.
knife.
That's not a knife. This is a knife.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm trying to build this homemade computer, and he's like, "That's not a computer," and he really took no interest in it until it became a business, and I started having employees and stuff, and then he decided he was going to tell me how to do it.
Well, it's so funny. My first experience with a computer was actually we had when I was in 8th or ninth grade, I think it was. We had a timeshare set up with an old teletype 33, and you had an acoustical modem that I think ran at 110 baud, but it connected to a Nova.
Fancy 300.
Yeah, but it connected to a Nova, and we could. They actually let us write programs on this thing, which was absolutely wonderful.
I had a little bit of that. I think just like 1 week or something at some point.
Yeah.
So I had little bits of it, and I was just like, I remember at one point in high school they had a IBM 5100, I think it was called, which was kind of
Interesting.
like a big laptop, and apparently it had a IBM 360 chip in it. It was
Oh my
basically
God.
but I think it ran basic. It was like
Wow.
$8,000 or something,
Yeah,
and it was kind of like a big programmable calculator. But it had the chip in it ran a 360 instruction set.
Yeah, the first personal computer though that I ever actually laid my hands on, it wasn't mine, but I actually laid my hands on, was a MITS Altair. And I had a friend in college. He was a high school buddy, and he got that very same Popular Electronics magazine you're talking about. Read the article, immediately had to get one, and I helped him solder the thing together.
So I had no money, so I couldn't get one. But they had a thing in the article, and it said, "Send off, and we'll send you the printed circuit board diagrams, so you can make your own printed circuit board and make it yourself." So, I definitely had money for an envelope and a stamp, and I sent that off, and they said, you know what they did? They took a board, and it was a pretty big board. It was bigger than a piece of paper, and they took it and they slapped it on a copying machine.
Oh my God.
And they copied it, and they made, then they slid, it was too big, so they slid it over and made another copy. And they flipped it over and made 2 more. So they sent 4 sheets. And of course, they wouldn't, there's no way you could ever make anything from this because it didn't line up, and it was just a copy machine.
Oh, and the copy machines in those days weren't that good either. So.
Copy machines, well, even if they were, I don't think, so, and I think I was a senior in high school, but I already knew, well, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So I decided, yeah, screw this. I don't need them, I guess. What was I thinking? I don't know. And I wrote off to Intel.
Wow.
And in those days you could write off to the semiconductor companies, and they would send you
Samples. Yeah.
Well, not samples. They didn't send chips.
Oh, yeah.
But books. You could get. So I got the Intel 8080, reference book, which I still have. And I also got, National Semiconductor. I've got a whole collection of, which I still have, of all these books of TTL reference and things like that. But the Intel one, and it's about this thick, and it starts off with the pinouts of the chips, and then there's all these timing diagrams of here's how things go up and down with the clock.
Yeah.
And then the back part was basically the instruction set. And here's what a jump instruction is. Here's a call. Here's a move. And that's kind of Well, I'd done a little bit of programming, but that's kind of, I think I read that book about 12 times. I just kept reading it over and over again until I just knew the whole thing backwards and forwards. And, so it's kind of like the thing with Apple. I was like, I was not, you couldn't deter me.
I'm gonna do this, by God.
I don't know how smart I am or whatever, but I'm very stubborn, and I do take on large projects, and I just I need to rewrite this entire 500,000 line program in Objective C. Okay.
Well, let's see. I'll get started right now.
That's well, okay, it's going to take 8 years, but so I and they kind of had in the book like well, here's how you hook up these chips, and it actually like the MITS people did it all wrong, really. So I actually designed a PC board. At the time I didn't know about wire wrapping. I learned about wire wrapping about a year later. You know what wire wrapping is?
Yeah.
I didn't, so I actually made a PC board. If you want, we could do a whole other talk. I've got hundreds of pictures of this thing.
Oh, wow.
And we could. I did a talk at a conference a couple of years ago about it, and I made this processor board, and I managed to buy the chips. They started selling them at a local store, and I bought an AWT chip, and then I couldn't actually try it and I was like, I bought this thing. It was like $150, which was a lot of money then. I was working as a draftsman, and I couldn't verify that it worked because I had nothing to plug it into for like 7 or 8 months. But I can't remember. There was something about like I didn't just buy it; it somehow became available, and it was like you could buy it. I had to buy it then. So I bought it ahead of time. But fortunately, it did work. It was in the static foam, anti-static.
Yeah.
You had to be real careful that you didn't ruin it. And
yeah, populating memory cards was always fun,
Well, I was wire wrapping some memory cards later.
Wow.
It was kind of like knitting, I thought.
Yeah.
Sit in front of the TV, and memory cards are pretty easy because they were just you didn't have to think about it. They just boop 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 boop. So I could sit and watch some TV show, and it was just like knitting. And
Very relaxing.
yeah, kind of. So I think I wound up wire wrapping about 8K of memory out of 2102 chips.
Wow.
So and
Scary.
eventually that computer, I had my own bus design in it, which was basically just the from the Intel book, and and then later I put it in a larger case, and I figured out how I could make an adapter so that some S100 cards would work. And so I was able to buy S100 memory, and
Nice.
eventually I got 56K of memory, and I had a Tarbell disk controller, and the thing eventually ran CPM, but it still had the processor that I built, and had a custom control panel and everything. And I wrote a program, a text editor program. That was one of the first visual text editor programs. And I sold it through Lifeboat Associates. I don't know if you ever remember them, but they were basically the first company to ever mail order sell microcomputer software.
Yeah, it's ringing a bell.
I think they were in New York.
Wow.
And this was around 1977. I went to the West Coast Computer Fair and had a booth. I think
Whoa.
in 1977. And at the time I was going to school, to college, Cal Poly Pomona, and I took off from school for a week, had a booth, and then came back and found out I had a midterm in one of my classes. That's a whole nother
Oops. Yeah, but
it worked out, but
well,
it was such an exciting time.
yeah, you think about the late 70s, early 80s in the computer business it really was exciting. It was like oh my God, we've dreamed about these things. We can actually have them in our houses now.
Yeah.
We can do things with these. And
Yeah, and interestingly, I think that what wound up happening was beyond all of our imaginations.
yeah,
And we had big imaginations,
yeah,
but not big enough.
yeah. Have you had
Of course,
ever
we didn't imagine all the bad things that were going to happen either.
exactly? But I just think about what if we hadn't had all of this incredible technology, and something like this pandemic had come along. How would people get together? How would you order products? How would you, communicate with other people? We'd be
Well,
making a lot of long
I mean, they
distance
did
phone
it in
calls.
1917.
Yeah, they did.
And probably the flip side is people, maybe the pandemic wouldn't have spread as fast, but
Yeah,
it did spread worldwide, um, in 1917. So,
very quickly.
um, yeah, I mean, look what we're able to do here. You know,
Yeah.
we're having this conversation, and yeah, my wife and I have not been to a grocery store since this happened. We've got all our food online. Um, so, yeah, that couldn't have happened.
Thinking back over the years, with let's see, Apple was incorporated April 1st, 1976, if I remember correctly,
Sounds right.
and they've come up with tons of products over the years. Some, I actually remember back in the 80s when we used to go to the local Apple sales office, and they would sign an NDA, and they would show you products that never came to market, which I always found was interesting. One of those being, it was a CD-based device that they wanted to sell to like airlines and companies that did a lot of maintenance work that needed maintenance manuals. And it was a really cool device. I've never been able to find any photos or anything else. I was ecstatic about it because at the time I was the manager of an IT department for a gas pipeline company, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is great. We can send people out. They can have a checklist they can go through. Da 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 da. We can train people with these. Wonderful. Never came out, but it was really cool. But what do you thinking of all the Apple products that you've seen over the years? What do you think was like the worst product that they ever came out with? And it can
Worst product.
it can be a Mac. It can be whatever.
The worst product Apple came out with. I don't know. I mean, I see a lot of little like paper cut kind of things.
Yeah.
Um, rather than big. Um, there's a lot of stuff every day that I'm like, really? You know, nobody's like, doesn't anybody at Apple use this?
Well, that's like I always think about this. This is a 16-inch MacBook Pro sitting in front of me. One of these, and when it came out, my first thought was, oh, great, it's going to have a much better FaceTime camera, and it didn't. It was the same.
I think I've got a 15-inch here, and I'm not using the camera on it, but I've got an external monitor, so I've got a Logitech sitting across on top of that. So that doesn't really bother me. My understanding is that the big reason for that is because that is so thin.
Yeah.
They would have to make a thicker. Like if you look at like an iPad or an iPhone, it's much thicker than the top lid
Yeah, that's
of,
true.
of a MacBook. So and lenses are a physical thing. You can only you are restricted by physics.
Doggone it.
And I don't think I would want a better camera at the expense of having to make the whole lid significantly thicker.
Yeah, good
So
point.
I think I'll give them a pass on that. One thing, a lot of people just bag on the touch bar. I kind of like the touch
I
bar.
love the touch bar. I think
I wouldn't go as far as saying I love it, but I don't hate it. And I kind of hope the next Mac I have has it. It would make me sad. Have you ever seen? There's an app called Touch Bar Piano.
yeah, yeah.
It's so awesome. But I don't use the touch bar much. But a lot of that is because you know, my laptop's over here where I'm looking, and I've got an external keyboard and mouse on front of my main. So most of the time it's docked, and my laptop's over there, and my touch bar's over there. So, but I still like it. So.
Yeah, it's so funny because this is actually my second touch bar machine. And the first one, I didn't really use the touch bar or touch ID all that much. And I don't know why. At that particular machine, just never used it. And for some reason, I don't know if it's because, maybe in the interim, a few more apps actually started making use of the touch bar. But I find myself using it a lot more than I did the previous iteration. So, yay.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I
Don't
want
know.
to circle back. This kind of like circles back a little bit to what we were talking about, the iPad and the Mac merging and this and that. I have a suspicion that Apple is going to come out with a Mac that is in the form factor of the iPad Pro.
Interesting.
Um, it seems pretty clear that they're going to add touch to the Mac. From the changes in Big Sur, things like the menu spacing increasing, and then obviously the fact that iOS apps could run on Big Sur.
Yeah.
Funny thing about that is like people are like, oh, the ARM enables that. That's not really true. They could have done that anytime they wanted to, because the Mac app or iOS apps have been running on Macs for 10 years. It's called the simulator.
Yeah.
So all they've done is essentially fancied up, and made the simulator so it, didn't require such a programmery thing. But they could have made Intel iOS apps, and that's kind of what Catalyst is.
Yeah.
So I think they've just decided, we're going to do it this way, but it could have been done. But I think that you look at what they're doing with iPad OS, and they're making a lot of changes that make it more Mac-y.
Yeah.
So things like pop-up menus, for example, they've just added. So you can make a pop-up menu on your iPad app. Well, guess what? When you port that iPad app to the Mac, whether you use Catalyst or you just run it, plain, all of a sudden it's going to be a much better Mac app.
Yeah.
And same thing, they've got the calendar pop-up, and there's a lot of little things that you see on iPad where it's like, no, they're not taking the Mac and making it more iPad-y. They're taking the
iPad
and making it more Mac-y. And it seems clear to me that a lot of this was probably, like we are planning that all these apps are going to be Mac apps, whether the developer even wants them to be or not. Did you notice that if you take an iPad app that's been written properly to work with slide over and split screen, that when you run it on a Mac, it automatically has a resizable window?
Yeah.
Developer doesn't have to do anything. So, they're taking UIKit and moving its features towards AppKit, so that you can write one app and it'll be a good Mac citizen and a good iOS citizen. And then conversely, they're taking the Mac and like taking the menu bar and obviously making it spread out a little bit more, and there's some other things that you can look at. I think what's I going to say? I don't remember, but anyway, I think they're going to wind up with this thing where you start with a $300 iPad, and then you move up to you know, a $5,000 machine or whatever. And right now there's sort of this discontinuity that, you know, you've got iPads and you've got Macs, and they're, you know, they're kind of separate. They run different software, you know, but now that's gonna be kind of a continuum.
Yeah.
You'll have the low-end iPads and they will just run the iOS software. But then you move up, and at some point, then it'll start being like, well, now our high-end machines are sort of the universal, and they run everything.
You've
And they
got
still
this
run the software.
trackpad. You've got the yeah.
Yeah, they've got a track. They can have a trackpad. They don't necessarily have to, but they
Yeah.
can have a trackpad, and you know they can run, you know, AppKit apps. So you can run Final Cut, you can run Xcode, you can run well, GarageBand's already an iOS app, but Logic. You know, you can run Panorama, assuming Panorama doesn't come out with an iOS app. Which it might. But but so instead of being this, you know, it'll sort of be like, okay, if you've been an iPad user, you know, now you've got a route that we can move you up into being a Mac user, and it doesn't mean you have to get rid of your iOS stuff. You know,
Yeah.
that still works, and you can just move up. And another thing I noticed was it appears to me that if you run iOS apps on Big Sur, it appears to me that they run not in the sandbox.
Interesting.
Unlike, you know, if it runs, so it's on iPad,
Yeah.
it's in a sandbox, it's a hassle to get apps to talk to each other
Yeah.
and make a workflow that, you know, pass a document from this to this and this. I can't say this for sure, but from what I saw on the videos, it looked like that's not the case if you run that same app under Mac OS. It becomes a Mac OS app, and I'm pretty sure I saw like an iOS app that was like open a document. It came up with a standard Mac document picker. And so
Wow.
I think, yeah. So,
This
like,
is
there's some apps on iPad that, you know, it's like, oh, you know, they're nice. I like them for, like, say, manipulating images or working with video or something. But I tend to avoid using them in my workflow because that means, well, my main workflow is on my Mac. That's where most of my work is. And so if I want to do a particular piece of it on the iPad, that means I've got to ship it over to the iPad, do it, and then ship it back. And it's not impossible. And if there's no, you know, if it's really a huge benefit, then yeah, I'll do it. But it's really, you know, discouraging to do that, you know. But if it's all on the same machine and there's no sandbox and it just becomes, you know, another tool on your Mac, that's awesome. And I think that's one thing that people are missing, you know, because I see quite a few people that are like, well, I don't want iOS apps on my Mac. Yeah, I do.
Yes, you do.
Control my sprinklers and see who's at my doorbell without going like, where's my iPhone? You know, it's around somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, I got to grab this and see who just rang the doorbell. Yeah.
Bring health over. It looks like they're not, at least for starters. You're still going to have to grab your iPhone to look at your health information. You can't even do that on your iPad. That sucks. I wish they would. Fix that. But yeah, I think this is huge, and it's kind of like, you know, they're now dropping. You know, if you're somebody that needs to run Windows apps, this is a problem for you. This transition. You know, you may not be able to run Windows apps anymore on these machines. I mean, maybe somebody will come up with an emulator and we'll see how the performance is, but it's definitely not going to be as good of a story about running Windows apps. But they're picking up iOS apps, you know, because Mac has always been sort of a Rosetta Stone. Well, yeah, you can run all the Mac stuff, but you could run Windows stuff too. And I think certainly 10 years ago, that was a big thing. You know, people had, you know, oh, I've got this one Windows app that I've got to run for my, you know, career, my business or something. I don't think that's as true now. A lot of those are web things now.
Yeah.
And some of those are iOS things too. Those people have, you know, companies have made iOS apps for those, you know, apps that aren't on the Mac. So I don't think it's as big a deal. I'm sure there'll be some people that, but Apple's picking up a Rosetta Stone, and it's different than the Rosetta technology, but in a different way, which is, okay, now you can run Mac apps and iOS apps. And, you know, I think in 2020, picking up iOS apps is going to be a way bigger win than losing Windows apps.
Yeah.
So, I think it's very possible that we're going to see an increase in Mac adoption, and those numbers that have hovered in those single digits for years, maybe that will be up in 5 years.
Yeah.
And as somebody that's a Mac software developer, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I think the Mac platform really did get a little bit of help from Microsoft. One of the big stories for years and years and years was, well, the Mac version of Microsoft Office just isn't the same. It just isn't the same. And now, for the most part, it is. With the exception of not having access, but that's why we've got Panorama. So, what can I say? And, it's, but, I think that was one of the big,
And I think even the iOS version of Office, people think is pretty good. I don't use
yeah,
Office,
either do I anymore. I just finally, for years I kind of let it drag on because there were people that said, you really need to, I have to have this in Microsoft Word format. And I finally just said, the hell with it, you need a file, I'll, write it in some other application and I'll crank it out as a docx and, do what you can with it. But I don't know. Well, I hate to call this to an end because,
we've run way over.
well, I tell you, we need to, at some point, I'll send you another invite and we'll schedule another time because I would love to get, talk a little bit more about history. And maybe what we can do is, some sort of get together where I actually have some, what I call my museum pieces, and we can take the museum pieces out. Don't have any old Macs. I pretty much over the years always, finance the new technology by selling the old technology. But I have things like a Newton. I have a quick take camera. Actually, that's the only development I ever did was for the Newton,
Really?
and it didn't go well. I'll just say that when you don't have a lot of people that you can sell software to, needless to say, you don't do very well. And so a lot of it, I just finally said, the hell with it, put it in the public domain. And occasionally I'll get an email from somebody saying, hey, I've got this old, one of the Newton eMates, remember those? I've got an old Newton eMate and I just found your app and I'm running it, and it's like, good for you. I'm happy for you.
Don't have to support though.
Yeah, you're not, no way am I supporting that, but it's absolutely great. Well, I will definitely, in our show notes, we'll have a link so that you can go out and take a look at the ProVUE website and read all about Panorama. By the way, your website is absolutely great. Did you redesign that recently or in the last couple of years?
2017.
Yeah, because I remember years and years ago looking at it and it was like, yeah, nice website. I love it now. I love it.
I redid it in boot camp in 2017 for the launch of Panorama 10.
Cool.
And yeah, there's some nice videos and stuff.
Yeah, it's just, it's a really well done site. And
I was pretty happy with it. It's kind of like, it was very frustrating to put together, and then all of a sudden it was just like, woof. I'm like, oh, wow, I did it. How did I do that? Don't touch it.
I was telling Chuck about kind of a story on website development. We're actually going to be doing a redesign of Apple World today. Because it's 5.5 years old. We were using a tool.
It's fresh though.
Yeah, but it could be fresher. Let's put it that way. And there's some things behind the scenes that we really don't like. But I was telling him a story yesterday, and I'll send you the same email about a website that we were working on, Dennis and I, and it was actually up for one day, and then it wasn't. And I'll I'll tell you the story. I really don't want to make it public, but it's an interesting story. So I'll send you an email on that.
We should have an offline. There's some addendums to the stories I've told today that I can't tell publicly, but
Cool. Cool stuff. Yeah, we'll definitely have to do this again because this has been
fun.
absolutely wild. It's been great.
I
I
have no
knew it
idea
was
what to expect.
well, and I knew you were definitely one of the people I really wanted to talk to right off the bat because, when we used to get together at Macworld iWorld, it was like, we always hit it off at those parties. Of course, those were beer fueled, so what can I say? But you're still, fun to talk to, and knowing that we're the same age, pretty much.
I think we did discover that once before, and I forgot it.
Me too. So,
Because that's what happens when you get to this age.
yeah, it's like, I don't know how old I am. Yeah.
It's great to get out to Colorado again. I haven't been since 2008.
Wow.
The last time I was there, and since then, one of my best friends that was there for many years left the state.
Oh no.
But then somebody else I know moved in, so I know 3 people there.
Yeah. Well, and I still have just tons of people I know all over California. Whether it's in the L.A. area or up in San Francisco. Someday. I still want to go to Apple Park.
I have been to the visitor center. I haven't been to. In fact, I had determined that this year I was going to go to the stockholders meeting because that gets you in the Jobs Theater.
Yeah.
And I own a little bit of Apple stock, and I talked to my financial guy, and I said there's this code I need, and they found out what it was, and they got it to me, and so it was kind of like signing up for a WWDC ticket. You had to get up at 8 in the morning and go on this website and sign up, and so I had that bookmark. This is a bucket list thing. I want to do this. So I got up at 8 in the morning and I went in, and it was like server error.
What?
Well, and I outsmarted myself. I think that they just hadn't, gotten it going.
Ah.
They were late. But I, having experience with WWDC tickets and having this exact same thing, I thought, oh, they're slammed. There's, millions of people, and, and they're getting, because that had happened to me, a few years ago with WWDC before they went to the lottery. And so after a while, I gave up. And I was just like, oh, well, and I moved on with the day. And then about 5 o'clock, I went, oh, let's go look again. And it was working fine, but by then it was sold out.
Ah.
But apparently, I think it wasn't slammed. They just hadn't gotten their act together, and it didn't occur to me oh, I should try in another half hour. I just assumed I lost my chance. It's already sold out.
Whoa. Well,
That could have been one of the last things to do before the pandemic, and they did put me on a waiting list, but it didn't. It didn't happen, and I guess it's not going to happen next year. So I did in 2018. A friend of mine and I went during WWDC, and we drove over and visited the visitor center, which is pretty cool in itself when you get a chance.
yeah, I hear
to do
that.
that. And they've got an observation deck on top of it. Next time I should make my Zoom background be that there. And actually, it looks like a really neat place. If I lived there, I think I'd bring a lunch and go up there and sit up there. It's very quiet and peaceful. But my friend I was with is a programmer, and I said, you're going to get me into that place. And he's like, what are you talking about? But he's on the Swift team now.
Whoa. Okay.
They are not in the ring. They don't work in the ring.
One of the side buildings there.
Well, it's off. Where he works is I think about half mile, 3/4 of a mile. It's up on Stevens Creek Boulevard.
Okay.
But I still think he's going to get me in there one of these days. And actually, I know somebody. There's a little. There's a group in Orange County. We call ourselves NS Coder Night. I think that might be a franchise sort of a name that meets on Tuesday nights, or I don't know. It may be over now. I think our run may have finally ended with this pandemic. But I don't know if it's going to start up again. We'll see.
Hopefully it will.
Well, it was kind of it kind of dwindled, so it was getting down to where it would just be like 2 or 3 people.
Ah.
So I don't know. It might be, but we'll see. But at one point, it was up to, a few years ago, we usually get like 8, 10, 12 people. And out of this group, there are 5 people that have gone on to work at Apple.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Would you have ever gone?
This is a group in Southern California.
Okay, so it's.
So yeah.
Wow.
They're not all there still, but yeah. And one guy just got hired like a couple months ago. So supposedly he's going to work in the ring when this is all over. But for now, he's still in Southern California.
But someday, someday he'll get to move up there. Well, I tell you, it has been absolutely wonderful. For folks who are maybe joining us a little late here, you can see it says Jim Rea in very small letters down there. Well, it's this.
It's not on the Zoom call.
It's showing up on my. Oh, maybe because I'm the leader, but. And hopefully that'll show up on the stream. If not, you're going to know who it is because I'm going to put his name all over. Yeah, and
it doesn't have the URL though. That's just the hero image off the website.
see, the next thing you do is create a one with like a flashing URL that comes up every once in a while, just so people know where to go. And now, well, it'll be in the notes.
On here, but I haven't. Do you know about OBS?
What's that?
Do you know about OBS?
Yeah.
I've got that installed, but I haven't quite worked it into my workflow.
In fact, that's what I'm using right now. Taking Zoom and.
If I have questions, I know who to call.
Well, you can read my series that I just finished. It's pretty basic, but I've got a 6-part series on OBS that was on the rocketyard.com, otherwise known as blog.macsales.com. So I do some writing for OWC and
No, I've seen that.
just finished that.
I don't think I get those emails anymore. Now that I think about it, maybe Gmail is diverting them because I know I always would see that, and they were always pretty good.
Yeah, they're good folks. They're fun to work for. We'll put it that way.
Emails from them, but I don't think I've seen the Rocket Yard emails for a while.
Huh? Yeah, they do one. I think it's either every Friday or every Saturday, but you will have to sign up because then you'll see see these things. Well, anyway,
The last one I got one in October of 2019. And here's one in November, but that's.
Trying to think if anything's changed. Yeah, they're doing them weekly, so. We'll put you on the list. Well, like I said, we'd better.
The last one, suddenly I stopped getting them in November.
Uh-oh. This is not good. Either that or, like you said, Gmail's doing something to it. So do you want to read anything written by Steve Sandy? So. Oh, man. Well, thanks once again for agreeing to come to this madness, and we will definitely do this again because I swear this is, the most fun I've had doing an online talk in a long time.
Thank you. Where is this going to show up?
It'll show up on YouTube. It'll show up on Facebook, and I don't know if Periscope keeps stuff out there permanently, but it'll definitely be on YouTube. Couple of hours. I'll send you the URL, and you can go out and watch yourself and go, did I really say that? Or did Steve say that? Okay, well, thanks once again. Everybody have a great day, and we'll be doing these from time to time. We'll definitely post them on the website once they're done. And for Apple World Today, I'm Steve Sandy. Everybody have a absolutely great week or month or whatever it happens to be. See you later.